So, Linda, shall we raise a toast to your two lovers?
I grew up in a modest neighborhood where everyone seemed to know everyone else. The houses were simple, the streets were lined with towering oaks, and the summers smelled of freshly cut grass and barbecue smoke. Life was steady and predictable, and my childhood was filled with the kind of innocence that now feels like a distant memory. My parents were hardworking, the kind of people who believed in earning your place in the world through dedication and integrity. They taught me the value of resilience and instilled in me a quiet determination to build a life I could be proud of. School came naturally to me, though I was never the most social. While other kids were out playing sports or causing mischief, I spent hours in my room tinkering with anything mechanical I could get my hands on. I loved the challenge of understanding how things worked, disassembling old radios, and piecing them back together with an almost obsessive focus. This curiosity laid the foundation for what would later become my career, though back then it was simply a way to pass the time in a small town where not much ever seemed to happen. My younger brother Bruce was my polar opposite. Where I was reserved and methodical, he was outgoing and impulsive. He could charm anyone with a smile and had a knack for turning even the dullest moments into an adventure. Despite our differences, we were close. He brought excitement into my otherwise structured world, while I often played the role of the cautious older sibling, trying to keep us both out of trouble. Our bond was shaped by the quiet struggles of our family and the unspoken understanding that no matter what, we had each other. As I moved through college and into the early stages of my career, I carried those childhood lessons with me. I sought stability and purpose, striving to carve out a place in the world where I could make a difference. At the time, I didn't realize how much those values would define not only my work, but also my relationships. I believed in building things that lasted, whether they were machines, ideas, or connections with the people I cared about. Looking back, those years seem almost idyllic compared to what came later. I was driven by a sense of clarity and ambition, fueled by the belief that with enough effort, anything was possible. But life, as I would come to learn, is far more complicated than the simple equations and designs I spent so much time perfecting. What I couldn't foresee was how the foundations I thought were solid could be shaken, and how even the most carefully built structures could collapse when cracks began to form beneath the surface. My name is Nathan, and I have devoted my career to advancing renewable energy technologies as a mechanical engineer at a prominent firm. My former wife, Linda, is 34 years old and possesses an extraordinary talent for event planning, with an unmatched ability to transform ordinary concepts into unforgettable experiences. Together, we share a remarkable 5-year-old daughter, Rose, whose boundless curiosity and love for dinosaurs are matched only by her constant companion, a well-worn explorer hat she wears everywhere. For years, we seemed like the perfect family, or so I thought. Looking back, I realize how far from perfect things actually were. Linda and I met 7 years ago at a green technology expo in San Francisco. I was there presenting a prototype for a solar-powered energy grid while she was managing the event. My younger brother Bruce introduced us. Bruce, who is also 34, has always been the charismatic one, someone who could talk his way out of trouble or into exclusive spaces with ease. At the time, he was dabbling in real estate and ambitiously building what he called his empire. He and Linda had met months earlier while working on a charity gala together, and their connection prompted him to introduce us. That evening, Linda and I struck up a conversation that flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything: her passion for creating memorable events, my years of dedication to renewable energy, and even lighter topics like movies. She made such a strong impression on me that I found myself captivated. Not long after, we began dating. The relationship developed quickly and smoothly, almost too smoothly in hindsight. Linda had this rare talent for making even ordinary moments feel extraordinary, as though life was one big celebration. Our relationship deepened quickly, and a year later, I proposed. Bruce played a significant role, helping me choose a ring and suggesting the perfect setting for the proposal, a vineyard Linda loved. After we got married, life felt like a dream. We bought a small home in San Jose, and Linda devoted herself to growing her event planning business while I advanced in my career. She poured her creativity into every aspect of our life, even designing Rose's nursery with a whimsical theme of pastel rainbows and stuffed animals. Bruce remained a constant presence in our lives. He often stopped by unannounced, helped with household projects, and even joined us for dinner. At the time, his involvement felt like support, But there were subtle signs that didn't sit well with me. Occasionally, Bruce and Linda would share inside jokes that excluded me or seem overly comfortable in each other's company. When disagreements arose between Linda and me, Bruce frequently sided with her, reinforcing her perspective without hesitation. The birth of Rose brought profound changes. Life became a blur of sleepless nights, early mornings, and hectic weekends. Linda, however, thrived in the chaos, effortlessly balancing her growing business and motherhood. Bruce became an ever-present figure, stepping in as the fun uncle who provided toys, treats, and much-needed breaks for us. I relied on him and trusted his involvement, believing that we were functioning as a team. Bruce had always been a central figure in my life. After the loss of our parents, he took on a protective role despite being the younger sibling. I trusted him completely, just as I trusted Linda. In hindsight, though, I was blind to the dynamics unfolding around me. I never questioned why Bruce seemed to know so much about Linda's work, or why she would share details with him that she hadn't mentioned to me. He always seemed to anticipate her needs or provide solutions to problems I hadn't realized existed. Caught up in the demands of work and family life, I failed to notice the cracks forming in our seemingly happy home. Reflecting now, it's clear I ignored signs that should have prompted deeper questions or concerns. Instead, I held on to the image of a perfect family, a devoted wife, a dependable brother, and a life I thought was secure. 2 years ago, Linda's career began to take up more of her time. Her event planning business was thriving, and she started landing high-profile clients, managing elaborate events, and traveling for work. Initially, I was proud of her success. It felt like she was achieving the independence and recognition she had always dreamed of. But as time passed, her career began to overshadow everything else. In the beginning, it was subtle. Linda used to eagerly share stories about her day, funny anecdotes about her clients, or the creative details that came together for an event. But that changed. When I asked about her day, her replies became curt. "Busy," she'd say, offering no elaboration. If I pressed for more, she'd dismiss it, claiming she was too tired to talk. I told myself she just needed space to recharge. Then came the so-called girls' weekends. Linda explained that her friends were planning spa retreats to de-stress from their hectic schedules. It sounded reasonable, and since she rarely took time for herself, I didn't question it. But what began as an occasional escape quickly became a recurring pattern. Every few months, there was another trip. Other shifts started to catch my attention. Her phone was suddenly glued to her hand, and when I asked who she was messaging, she'd casually mention it was a client, or Melissa, her closest friend. Yet for the first time, she began tilting her screen away or stepping out of the room to take calls. I rationalized it as just part of her demanding job. Meanwhile, our intimacy began to wane. Once affectionate and warm, she seemed to withdraw. One night, she wore a stunning set of lingerie I'd never seen before. She looked amazing, but when I reached out to her, she brushed me off, claiming exhaustion. This became the norm. She was too tired, not in the mood, or simply disengaged. After a while, I stopped trying. I convinced myself it was just a rough patch. We were both overwhelmed with work and parenting, and I believed we'd find our way back to each other. What unsettled me the most, though, was how much she seemed to confide in Bruce instead of me. They'd always been friendly, but now it felt like he knew more about her life than I did. If she was stressed about work, Bruce would appear with her favorite dessert or take Rose out so Linda could relax. While thoughtful on the surface, it felt like I was being edged out of my own marriage. A particular evening stands out in my memory. We were hosting a dinner for some of Linda's clients, and Bruce arrived early to help. As I prepared vegetables in the kitchen, their laughter echoed from the living room. Linda mentioned how much Bruce's support meant to her, and his reply only deepened my discomfort. I brushed it off as paranoia, reasoning that their bond was natural given our closeness as a family. Still, the unease lingered. When I finally broached the topic with Linda, she reacted with bewilderment. She insisted that Bruce was simply being supportive as my brother and that I should appreciate his efforts. Her response left me feeling foolish, and I decided to drop it. Yet, the tension in my gut didn't fade. Bruce, for his part, always had a reassuring explanation whenever I voiced concerns. If I mentioned Linda's growing distance, he'd suggest she was under immense pressure and needed time. When I brought up the lack of intimacy, he'd chuckle and chalk it up to the realities of marriage. He had a knack for making me doubt my instincts, and because he was my brother, I believed him. But the changes weren't limited to her interactions with Bruce. Even her dynamic with Rose began to shift. Linda, once the epitome of an engaged and patient mother, started using our daughter as a buffer. If a conversation between us grew tense, she'd immediately pivot to suggesting something involving Rose, a trip to the park, dress-up games, or a movie night. At first, I interpreted this as her way of easing tension, but over time it felt more deliberate. It seemed like she was avoiding being alone with me, and no matter how hard I tried to bridge the growing divide, it felt like I was grasping at something slipping further out of reach. As our 7th anniversary approached, I held on to a faint hope that we could find our way back to each other. I spent months planning something meaningful, hoping to reignite the connection we'd lost. Despite the distance and strain, I convinced myself it was just a phase brought on by the demands of life. I envisioned an evening that would rekindle our bond, a chance to laugh, share, and rediscover the love we once had. My plan was to recreate one of our most cherished memories, a weekend we'd spent at a vineyard in Sonoma during the early days of our relationship. It had been magical, filled with laughter, wine, and a carefree joy that made the world feel far away. Linda had often talked about how much she'd loved it, and I thought returning to that place would remind us both of how far we'd come together. I poured my heart into the idea, clinging to the belief that it could break through the walls between us. Little did I know how fragile things had already become. I arranged for a private space at the vineyard and worked closely with the staff to create an evening tailored to Linda's tastes. The menu featured all her favorite dishes, from roasted mushroom tartlets to lavender panna cotta, a dessert she had adored during a previous visit. To add to the atmosphere, I hired a small jazz band to play music she loved. Close family and friends were invited, including her best friend Melissa, who had recently moved back to California after years away. My goal was to craft an event that celebrated Linda's passions and symbolized the life we had built together. Bruce was one of the first people I told about my plan. True to form, he was enthusiastic, offering his help and encouragement. He assured me that Linda would love the effort and even volunteered to assist with setting up the event. At the time, his involvement felt natural. He had always been supportive and eager to help. I was so focused on making the evening perfect that I didn't question anything. On the night of the celebration, everything came together seamlessly. Linda believed we were heading out for a quiet dinner, so when we arrived and everyone greeted her with a surprise, she was genuinely taken aback. Tears welled in her eyes as she hugged me, clearly moved by the gesture. For the first time in what felt like ages, I felt I had done something right. The setting was breathtaking. Twinkling string lights draped across the patio, candles glowed softly on the tables, and the scent of lavender mingled with the fresh air of the vineyard. Linda couldn't stop marveling at how beautiful everything was, repeatedly expressing her amazement at the thoughtfulness of the evening. For a brief time, it seemed like the tension that had been building between us had evaporated. The dinner began on a high note. The food was exceptional, the wine flowed freely, and the atmosphere was filled with laughter and lively conversations. Linda, seated between Melissa and me, seemed at ease for the first time in months. She chatted and laughed as if the stress of recent times had lifted. Her happiness was infectious, and for a moment I allowed myself to believe that we were reconnecting. Bruce, ever the entertainer, was in his element. His jokes and toasts kept everyone engaged, his charisma drawing smiles and laughter from everyone at the table. For a little while, the evening felt like a perfect success. Then Melissa stood to make a toast. Her kind words focused on Linda and me as a couple, praising the love and connection we represented. Her speech brought warmth to the table, and I felt a flicker of hope as Linda's hand brushed mine. But then Melissa added something that changed the tone entirely. She mentioned how much Bruce had been a steady support for Linda over the past couple of years, a comment that landed like a blow. The atmosphere shifted instantly. My stomach tightened, and the light-hearted buzz of the evening was replaced by unease. Glancing at Linda, I noticed her expression change. She avoided my gaze, her face pale as she reached for her wineglass and took a deliberate sip. The comment lingered in my mind, and I couldn't ignore it. Trying to process what Melissa had implied, I glanced between her, Linda, and Bruce. Linda brushed off the remark, explaining that Bruce had been helping out with Rose and supporting her during work-related stress. Bruce, for his part, confirmed this without hesitation, describing his efforts to assist when Linda's schedule became overwhelming. Although their explanations seemed reasonable on the surface, I couldn't shake the uneasiness. Bruce raised another toast, attempting to steer the mood back toward celebration. He framed his actions as family support, emphasizing the importance of being there for each other. Despite his charm, the tension lingered. Linda's demeanor became increasingly uncomfortable. Her smile no longer reached her eyes, and she avoided direct interaction. She downplayed the situation, calling it a matter of logistics, but her dismissive tone only deepened my suspicions. Melissa, who had sparked the conversation, suddenly appeared hesitant and overly focused on her wine glass. The earlier warmth at the table dissolved into an awkward silence. I observed Linda closely, searching for answers in her expressions, but she refused to meet my gaze. Instead, she picked at her plate, her movements tense and distracted. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of the moment. There was a clear shift between us, a feeling that something critical was being left unsaid. Although I pressed for more clarity, Linda avoided the conversation entirely, stating firmly that it wasn't the right time or place to discuss such matters. Her response left a void that hung over the rest of the evening, one I couldn't ignore. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier with each passing second, suffocating me in an oppressive silence. I forced myself to wear a strained smile, leaning back in my chair, though my appetite had vanished entirely. The rest of the dinner played out with a fragile veneer of politeness, but the unspoken tension hung between us like a dark cloud. Melissa's comment had shattered the evening's mood. Her words about Bruce being a rock for Linda had carried a weight that couldn't be ignored. The room fell into an uncomfortable stillness. Bruce attempted to deflect, his laugh unnaturally loud as he made light of the situation. A few half-hearted chuckles followed, but the energy had shifted. Conversation stumbled awkwardly forward, though my mind was elsewhere, replaying the moment. Linda's demeanor had changed too, her earlier warmth and laughter replaced by a tense silence. Melissa avoided looking at me, while Bruce carried on as if nothing unusual had occurred. By the time we left, my chest felt tight with unease. In the car, I couldn't hold back any longer and pressed Linda about what had happened. She deflected, brushing off Melissa's words as a careless remark and refusing to engage further. Her tone was firm, signaling that she had no intention of discussing it. The remainder of the drive home was a cold, heavy silence, broken only by the occasional sound of Linda shifting in her seat. The next morning, as I tried to shake off a restless night, my phone buzzed. It was Melissa. Her voice was hesitant, almost apologetic, as she asked if we could talk. Though still groggy, I agreed. Something in her tone set me on edge. She sounded conflicted, her words measured as if she was debating how much to reveal. When I asked what it was about, her response was vague, but she insisted on coming over. She said it was something I needed to see for myself. When Melissa arrived, she was visibly anxious. She clutched her purse tightly, her knuckles white, and her eyes darted nervously around the room as though expecting someone to confront her. She immediately apologized, explaining that she hadn't wanted to get involved, but felt she could no longer stay silent. Her words carried a gravity that made my stomach churn. From her purse, she produced a small flash drive, handing it to me with trembling hands. She avoided meeting my gaze as she explained that it contained information I needed to see. Despite her cryptic explanations, the weight in her voice sent a chill through me. She expressed regret for being the one to break the news, but insisted I deserved to know the truth. Without elaborating further, she left abruptly, leaving me standing in the doorway with the flash drive in hand. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours, staring at the drive. My laptop sat open on the coffee table, the cursor blinking as though urging me to act. My thoughts spiraled in a whirlwind of fear, anger, and denial. I tried to convince myself that it was all a misunderstanding, that Melissa was mistaken, but deep down, I knew better. Melissa wouldn't have come to me unless she was absolutely certain. Finally, with trembling hands, I plugged in the flash drive and opened the first file. It was an email dated over 2 years ago, just before Linda's first supposed girls' weekend. The subject line hit me like a blow. Miss you. I hesitated, staring at the screen as the words blurred through tears. Clicking it open felt like ripping away a piece of myself. The message was short, but devastating. Linda, I wish I could see you this weekend. This is getting harder to hide. I know I am. But it's worth it. You know that, right? Nathan doesn't have to know. The words felt like knives, each one slicing deeper into me. My fists clenched and my heart pounded so hard it ached. I tried to steady my breathing, but the panic in my chest wouldn't subside. My mind raced, desperate to make sense of what I was reading. I forced myself to click on another email, dreading what I might find but unable to stop. This one was even worse. Bruce, I'll see you tomorrow at the usual spot. Nathan thinks I'm in meetings all day, so we're good. Can't wait. My vision blurred, and my stomach twisted in knots. The words confirmed what I had been too blind to see for years. My hands shook as I scrolled through more emails, each one unraveling another thread of the life I thought I knew. The betrayal was undeniable, glaring back at me from the screen. I sat in stunned silence, the storm of emotions crashing over me. Anger, heartbreak, disbelief. Everything I had believed in, my marriage, my family, felt like a carefully constructed lie. The truth was staring me in the face, and there was no going back. The walls of the room seemed to close in around me as I scrolled through email after email, each one more incriminating than the last. The messages revealed carefully planned meetups while I was at work and business trips that served as covers for secret weekends together. Every detail had been meticulously arranged. Fake schedules, rehearsed explanations, and even strategies for deflecting suspicion if either I or Melissa began to ask questions. One email titled, "Weekend Plans, Stop Me Cold." It read, "Linda, everything's set for this weekend. Nathan's too preoccupied with his project to notice anything. You're incredible at keeping him in the dark. I can't wait to see you." I slammed the laptop shut, my breath quickening and my chest tightening with a mix of fury and disbelief. The betrayal felt incomprehensible. How could Linda do this? And with Bruce, of all people? My mind spiraled, replaying the past 2 years. Every supposed business trip, every late-night text, every excuse I'd so naively believed. The truth stared back at me, undeniable and crushing. Gripping my phone, I hovered over Linda's contact, desperate to confront her. But what could I say? How could I put this kind of betrayal into words? My emotions overwhelmed me, and instead I called Melissa. She answered immediately, her voice heavy with the weight of what I'd discovered. She admitted she had started suspecting something a year ago, after overhearing a suspicious phone conversation between Bruce and Linda. When she confronted Linda, she had been met with denial and excuses, leaving her unsure of how to proceed. It wasn't until she saw the emails on Bruce's laptop that she felt compelled to act. Her regret was evident as she apologized for not coming to me sooner. I ended the call, unable to say much more, and sat in stunned silence, trying to make sense of the shattered remains of the life I thought I knew. My mind was a storm of emotions, anger, grief, humiliation. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or throw the laptop across the room. Yet something compelled me to dig deeper. I noticed another folder on the flash drive labeled Photos. For a moment, I hesitated, unsure if I could handle more. But curiosity, or perhaps a need for closure, pushed me forward. With trembling hands, I opened the folder. At first, the images seemed innocent enough. Linda and Bruce laughing over drinks at what appeared to be a casual outing. But as I scrolled, the pictures became increasingly damning. There were photos of them in intimate settings, lounging in hotel robes, their smiles wide and exclusive as though they were the only two people in the world. One image froze me in place. Linda posed on a bed in lingerie I'd never seen, her gaze locked on the camera. In the corner of the frame, Bruce's hand rested on her thigh, unmistakable in its familiarity. My breath caught as I continued scrolling, each image confirming what I had refused to believe. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. Mixed in with the recent photos were older ones, some dating back over 7 years, long before Linda and I were married. My heart sank as I recognized a park in one of the pictures, the same park where Linda and I had gone on our third date. But instead of me, it was Bruce sitting next to her on a bench, their bodies close, sharing a private joke. The realization struck like a freight train. This wasn't a recent betrayal. It was a thread that had been woven through our entire relationship. Every cherished memory now felt tainted by the possibility that Bruce had been there all along, hiding in plain sight. Had my marriage been a lie from the start? Was I just a placeholder while they carried on their secret relationship? Shaking, I slammed the laptop shut and buried my face in my hands. My world felt like it had been turned upside down. The woman I had trusted implicitly, the brother I had always looked up to, both had conspired to deceive me. Every kiss, every promise, every shared moment now felt like a cruel joke. In my desperation to understand, I opened another folder on the flash drive titled Messages. These were Facebook exchanges between Linda and Bruce, dating back to the time Bruce had introduced me to her. At first, the messages seemed harmless, but as I read further, the truth became undeniable. They had orchestrated everything from the start. Bruce had convinced Linda that I was the safe, stable choice, the dependable older brother who could offer her a comfortable life. One message hit me like a dagger. "Nathan will give you everything you need. He's predictable. I'm not, but I'll always be here for you. He can be your husband while I take care of your special needs." The words twisted in my gut like a knife. Every assumption I had made about my life, my marriage, and my family was unraveling before my eyes. I was left staring at the screen, my vision blurred by tears of anger and heartbreak, struggling to grasp the magnitude of the betrayal. My chest tightened as the full weight of the situation settled over me. I felt utterly broken, betrayed, and unsure of who or what I could trust anymore. The enormity of the betrayal felt like a fire raging inside me, burning through every ounce of trust I had ever placed in them. Each word, every detail I uncovered felt like a deliberate mockery of my love and loyalty. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a calculated exploitation of everything I held dear. Unable to stomach any more, I slammed the laptop shut. The sharp sound echoed through the silence, reverberating like a physical blow. My chest heaved with a toxic mix of rage and despair as I stumbled into the kitchen, desperate for air. I reached for a glass of water, but my hands were trembling so badly that most of it spilled, soaking the counter and my sleeve. The icy sensation barely registered. I was too consumed by the realization that my life, my marriage, had been nothing but a carefully maintained illusion. Every memory I'd cherished felt poisoned, tainted by the knowledge that Linda and Bruce had been scheming behind my back. Then an even darker thought struck me, hitting with the force of a sledgehammer. What about Rose? Was she even my daughter? The question nearly sent me to my knees. I staggered to the table and collapsed into a chair, burying my face in my hands as my mind raced through the implications. If Rose wasn't mine, what did that mean for the life I'd built, for all the sacrifices I'd made? Questions clawed at me, demanding answers I wasn't ready to face. Should I confront Linda immediately? Call Bruce? Or would it be smarter to gather every shred of evidence before they had a chance to twist the narrative? My thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of my phone. A message from Linda flashed on the screen. Running late. Don't wait up. Love you. The audacity of her casual, affectionate text made my anger surge. How could she send such a message while I sat here drowning in the bitter truth of her lies? I wanted to call her, to demand answers, to unleash the storm of emotions that had been building inside me. But I stopped myself. Confronting her now would only give her time to fabricate excuses. I needed to stay calm, to be strategic. Instead, I dialed Melissa. She picked up almost immediately, her voice heavy with guilt. Her voice wavered as she confessed that she had found the flash drive containing the damning emails and photos. At that point, she could no longer remain silent. Despite her apology, I felt a surge of anger toward her for keeping this from me for so long. Yet I also felt a sliver of gratitude that she had come forward now, even if it was too late to salvage the life I thought I had. Melissa's revelations didn't end there. With obvious reluctance, she told me that Bruce's real estate business wasn't as legitimate as he portrayed. My stomach churned as I realized the betrayal went far deeper than just an affair. When we ended the call, I was left reeling. If Bruce's business was a front for something illegal, it meant the web of deceit stretched even further than I had imagined. Determined to uncover the truth, I reopened the laptop and clicked on a folder labeled Financials. What I found inside sent a chill down my spine. There were spreadsheets, invoices, and transaction logs tying Linda's event planning business to Bruce's real estate accounts. Payments from her clients were being funneled into offshore accounts and split between multiple entities. Notes flagged terms like transfer to offshore and split for cover expenses. The evidence painted a picture of more than just infidelity, it was money laundering. My breath caught as the realization set in. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. Linda and Bruce were involved in a criminal operation, one that had used me as an unwitting pawn. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the files, each new document confirming what I desperately wanted to deny. The marriage I thought I had, the family I believed in, was nothing more than a front for something dark and corrupt. Leaning back in the chair, I felt an icy numbness creep over me. The sheer weight of what I'd uncovered was suffocating. This was no longer about heartbreak or betrayal. It was about unraveling a conspiracy that went far beyond anything I could have imagined. I couldn't handle this alone. As much as I wanted to confront them both immediately, I knew I needed help. This wasn't just a personal battle. It had become something far bigger, and I couldn't face it without backup. I decided to confront Linda first, hoping to catch her off guard and force some truth out of her. Bruce wasn't around, and I thought seeing her reaction face to face would expose more than words alone. I needed to hear her own admission of guilt, to see if there was any trace of remorse behind her lies. When she came home that evening, she walked in as if everything was normal. She placed her bag by the door and greeted me with the same casual warmth that once felt comforting, but now turned my stomach. Her cheerfulness in the face of everything I'd discovered felt like an insult. I steadied my voice, suppressing the storm inside me, and told her we needed to talk. Her cheerful facade faltered for a moment before she nodded and headed into the living room. She curled up on the couch, her familiar posture a stark contrast to the tension boiling in the air. I stood across from her, unable to sit, too consumed by anger to pretend at composure. Without hesitation, I told her I knew about her and Bruce. My voice was harder than I intended, the words falling like an accusation. Her expression froze, the color draining from her face. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, but instead, she lowered her gaze to her hands and quietly asked how I had found out. There was no denial, no attempt to explain away the affair, just a resigned acceptance of her guilt. I told her I'd seen everything, the emails, the photos, the years of deception laid bare before me. She barely managed a broken explanation, mumbling something about how it just happened, her voice trembling as though she were trying to convince herself as much as me. Her tears began to flow as she sobbed uncontrollably, her shoulders shaking, but her display of emotion only made the pain sharper, more cutting. I felt no sympathy, only rage. She claimed she never meant to hurt me, that she still loved me, but her words felt hollow, a mockery of everything we had once shared. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound almost foreign in the tense silence of the room. How could she claim to love me after everything she'd done? Love doesn't lead someone to betray their spouse with their brother, to mock their trust while building a web of lies. Her tears didn't soften my anger. They fueled it. As I paced the room, my emotions spilled out, escalating with every word. I demanded answers about the money, about her involvement in Bruce's shady business dealings. The documents I'd uncovered weren't just evidence of an affair, they pointed to something far more sinister. Linda's head snapped up at the mention of money laundering, her wide eyes betraying panic. She denied any knowledge of Bruce's illegal activities, claiming she hadn't known what he was doing. Her desperation was evident, but I wasn't willing to believe her anymore. I had seen too much, and her words carried no weight. She begged me to understand, pleaded that she had made a terrible mistake, but her declarations of love and attempts to salvage our relationship only deepened the wound. She asked if we could fix things, as if the damage she'd done could be undone with words. The suggestion was almost laughable. Fix things? After years of betrayal and lies? The woman sitting in front of me was a stranger, not the partner I had built my life with. I couldn't stand to look at her any longer. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt suffocating, heavy with the weight of deceit. Without another word, I turned and left the room, needing space to think, to breathe, to figure out what to do next. The following morning, the gravity of the situation still hung over me like a storm cloud. I knew it was time to confront Bruce. The thought of facing him made my anger ignite, but I couldn't delay it any longer. He needed to be held accountable for the destruction he'd caused. I drove to his office, each mile fueling the fury burning inside me. When I arrived, I ignored his assistant's cheerful greeting, brushing past her without a word. I burst into his office, startling him out of his casual posture as he scrolled through his phone. For a brief moment, his face betrayed surprise, but it was quickly replaced by the smug grin I had come to hate. He greeted me with mock warmth, pretending as though everything was fine. His nonchalant demeanor only made my anger rise. Without wasting a second, I slammed the door behind me, the sound reverberating through the room as I demanded answers. His posture shifted, his relaxed demeanor giving way to something more guarded. He let out a sigh, almost as if he were bored with my fury, and casually acknowledged what I had uncovered. His admission, far from apologetic, carried an air of inevitability, as though this confrontation was just another inconvenience to him. I pressed him for the truth, for an explanation of how long he had planned to keep me in the dark. My words were sharp, my voice trembling with the weight of betrayal and fury. Bruce, ever the charmer, tried to deflect, but his attempts only fanned the flames of my rage. This was the man I had trusted above anyone else, and now he stood before me as the architect of my humiliation. The coldness in Bruce's demeanor struck me immediately. He didn't flinch or show any sign of regret. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, exuding a calm indifference that made my anger simmer. His tone was almost patronizing as he apologized, not for his actions, but for the way I had found out. It was as if the betrayal itself wasn't the issue, only that his secret had been exposed. His attempt to downplay everything pushed me over the edge. The words tumbled out of me, each one sharp and raw, as I demanded to know how he could justify years of deceit. Bruce, ever calculated, raised his hands in a feigned gesture of peace, claiming that things weren't as they seemed. His nonchalant attitude only deepened my fury. When I confronted him about sleeping with Linda, his response was chillingly detached. He admitted their relationship, but framed it as something inevitable, even justified. He spoke of history between them, as though that excused their actions. My anger flared as I reminded him of how he had manipulated Linda into marrying me, convincing her that I was the dependable choice, while he continued their affair in secret. His expression hardened, the mask of remorse slipping away to reveal something colder. He accused me of always having everything: success, stability, respect, and claimed that what he and Linda shared was real. His justification only deepened the wound, each word hammering home how they had used me as a pawn in their twisted scheme. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The weight of his words pressed down on me, robbing me of air. I finally whispered, almost to myself, that they had used me, turned my life into a lie for their own gain. Bruce, in an attempt to soften the blow, added that Linda still loved me. The words felt like poison, a calculated attempt to manipulate me into accepting the unacceptable. Unable to endure his callousness any longer, I stormed out of his office, ignoring his attempts to call me back. The fury and pain inside me were overwhelming, a storm I couldn't contain. That night, I sat in the darkened living room, the silence oppressive as I tried to process the enormity of what had been destroyed. My marriage, my trust, my family, all of it had been reduced to ash. Amid the chaos of betrayal, one thought kept gnawing at me, refusing to be ignored. What about Rose? The possibility that she wasn't my daughter clawed at my mind, filling me with dread. If she wasn't mine, then what was left? Had everything I thought I'd built been a fantasy? The question haunted me, its weight unbearable. Unable to live with the uncertainty, I made a decision. I had to know the truth. I needed a paternity test for Rose. The thought of it terrified me, but the lies had already done enough damage. I couldn't continue living in doubt. Dropping the envelope with the test into the mailbox felt like stepping into an abyss. The waiting was excruciating, each day stretching endlessly as I grappled with the possibility that my worst fears could be confirmed. At home, the tension was unbearable. Linda's presence was suffocating. Every interaction felt like a battle I didn't have the strength to fight. She kept trying to talk, offering apologies and pleas to work things out, but I refused. There was nothing left to say. Seeing her only reignited the fury and disgust I felt every time I thought about her betrayal. Rose, blissfully unaware, remained the one light in the darkness. Her laughter and calls of "Daddy" broke my heart in ways I couldn't explain. Every moment with her felt bittersweet, haunted by the possibility that she wasn't mine. The thought consumed me, a constant torment that I couldn't escape. One evening after Rose had gone to bed, Linda cornered me in the kitchen. Her expression was a mix of guilt and desperation as she blocked my path. She insisted that we needed to talk, to figure out how to move forward for Rose's sake. Her words struck a nerve, igniting the anger I had tried to suppress. I snapped back, reminding her that she hadn't considered Rose's well-being when she was sneaking around with Bruce. She hadn't cared about Rose when she was lying to me, pretending everything was fine while destroying the family we had built. My words hit her like a slap, but she didn't back down. She claimed she had made a terrible mistake, begged for forgiveness, and insisted that Rose didn't deserve to lose her family because of her actions. Her plea only deepened my bitterness. The irony of her words stung. She had destroyed everything, and now she wanted to shift the responsibility onto me. I told her that if Rose lost anyone, it would be because of her and Bruce, not me. The conversation ended with a silence that was heavier than words, leaving us both standing in the suffocating tension of what could never be repaired. The sight of her breaking down, tears streaming down her face, left me unmoved. Her remorse felt hollow, a performance designed to shift the blame or garner sympathy. I turned and walked away, her sobs echoing behind me, her apologies falling flat. Nothing she could say would erase the damage she had done. The betrayal was too profound, and I was done listening to excuses. The next morning, I decided it was time to act. Gathering every piece of evidence, the flash drive, emails, financial records, and incriminating documents, I drove to the police station. There was no hesitation. I no longer cared about protecting Linda or Bruce. They had made their choices, and it was time for them to face the consequences. The officers took the evidence seriously. As they combed through the files, their expressions grew grim. One muttered under his breath about the magnitude of the case, and I spent hours recounting everything I knew, how I had uncovered the affair, pieced together the financial connections, and traced the threads back to Bruce's illegal activities. When I left the station that afternoon, I was exhausted, but there was an undeniable sense of relief. I wasn't carrying the weight of this alone anymore. That same day, a letter arrived in the mail, the results of the paternity test for Rose. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope, my heart pounding as I skimmed the document. Relief flooded through me as I read the results. Rose was mine. In the midst of everything falling apart, this was something I could hold on to. She was my daughter, no matter what else had been destroyed. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of peace, but it didn't last. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, there was a knock at the door. 2 police officers stood on the porch, warrant in hand. Linda's arrest was swift and efficient. Her sobs filled the hallway as she was led away in handcuffs, pleading with me to believe she hadn't known the full extent of Bruce's schemes. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She had made her choices, and now she would have to face the consequences. Bruce wasn't far behind. Days later, the police raided his office, arresting him and 2 business associates involved in his financial crimes. The image of them being escorted out in handcuffs, faces pale with disbelief and anger, would stay with me for a long time. It was a fitting end to the web of lies they had spun. The divorce proceedings were as brutal as I had anticipated. I wasted no time filing after Linda's arrest. The marriage was beyond saving, and each step of the legal process was a painful reminder of the betrayal I had endured. Meetings with my attorney became a grim routine as we sifted through financial records, property claims, and evidence of Linda's deceit. Linda, perhaps out of guilt, didn't contest much. Her lawyer tried to negotiate for joint custody of Rose, but I refused. After everything, there was no way I would let her be part of Rose's life. With criminal charges looming over her and her involvement in Bruce's activities clear, I was determined to protect my daughter from her influence. In court, Linda was a shadow of the woman I had once known. She barely spoke as her lawyer argued for leniency, claiming she was a first-time offender who had been manipulated by Bruce. The judge wasn't swayed. The evidence was overwhelming, and the decision was clear. I was granted full custody of Rose. It was a hollow victory given the circumstances, but it brought some measure of closure. Linda's lawyer attempted to argue for a share of my assets, citing her business's supposed contributions. The court saw through the ploy. Her event planning business, tied to Bruce's money laundering, had no value in the eyes of the law. The judge ruled in my favor, leaving Linda with nothing but the mess she had created. Her legal battles, criminal charges, and a life in ruins. 6 months have passed since everything unraveled, and I'm still finding my footing. Linda has been out of our lives entirely since her arrest. The last time I saw her was during an early court hearing. She looked defeated, a far cry from the confident woman I had once loved. I didn't feel pity for her anymore, only a cold detachment. She didn't meet my gaze, and I had no intention of making things easier for her. Her lawyer continues to push for a plea deal, painting her as a naive participant manipulated by Bruce. It's predictable, the same tired narrative of a first-time offender seeking leniency. Even if she manages to reduce her sentence, I can't imagine a future where she's part of our lives again. How could I? After everything she's done, the idea of letting her back in feels unimaginable. Rose deserves better, and so do I. Bruce's downfall has been nothing short of catastrophic. He's behind bars now, facing a slew of serious charges with no indication that a plea deal is on the table. His fraudulent schemes made headlines after investigators exposed the true scale of his operations. It wasn't just small investors he duped. He swindled high-profile clients, people with the resources and determination to ensure he faces the full weight of justice. From what I've heard, he's staring down a minimum of 8 years in prison. I can't find it in me to feel sympathy. He deserves every second of it. Amid all the upheaval, Rose has been my source of strength. While she doesn't understand the full extent of what's happened, she's aware that life has changed. A few months ago, she stopped asking about Linda altogether. At first, it felt like a relief, but now I wonder if it's a sign of something deeper. Rose has adjusted far faster than I anticipated, slipping into our new routine with a resilience that both comforts and saddens me. It's heartening to see her adapt so well, but it's also a painful reminder of everything she's lost. Pieces of her childhood stolen by circumstances she didn't choose. Surprisingly, Linda's parents have stepped up in ways I didn't expect. I had braced myself for them to defend her actions or make excuses, but instead, they've been nothing but supportive. Her father even offered to contribute to Rose's school tuition, saying it was the least they could do to help repair the damage Linda caused. During a late-night phone call, his voice was heavy with regret as he admitted, "She's still my daughter, but I can't justify what she's done. I raised her to know better." While their efforts can't erase the pain, I do appreciate their willingness to face the truth without trying to shift blame. It's a strange dynamic, one I'm still navigating, but their honesty has been a small comfort in an otherwise overwhelming situation. Last week, I made the tough choice to sell our house. It's simply too large for just the two of us, and the memories embedded within its walls are too painful to bear. The new house is smaller, quieter, and unburdened by the past. Sitting here now, surrounded by unpacked boxes, I feel an unfamiliar sense of calm. Rose has already settled into her new room. Though it's smaller than the one she had before, she's fallen in love with it. Her favorite spot is the little window seat where she curls up to read for hours. Hearing her soft laughter drift down the hallway gives me a sense of hope I haven't felt in months. I'm not pretending that everything is okay, and I know the scars of betrayal will stay with me. Forgetting isn't possible, but I'm learning to live with the pain and move forward step by step. Linda and Bruce shattered my trust and turned my world upside down, but they didn't break me. Through it all, I still have Rose. She's my anchor, the one part of my life untouched by their lies and schemes. Being her father gives me purpose, reminding me every day of what truly matters. As long as I continue to show up for her, to give her the love and stability she deserves, I know I'll be okay. Life isn't what I imagined it would be, and it's far from perfect. But it's mine, and for now, that's enough. In the quiet moments after the chaos subsides, you start to realize that rebuilding isn't about erasing the past. It's about learning to live with it, about carrying the weight of it without letting it crush you. Moving into the new house was one step, but the journey toward finding peace was far from over. The new neighborhood is different, quieter. It doesn't have the sprawling parks or bustling streets I was used to, but it has something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of stillness. Rose has adjusted quickly, as children often do. Her laughter fills the small house, bouncing off the walls and chasing away the lingering shadows of doubt and regret. She talks about her school friends, her favorite books, and the dinosaurs she still adores, her bright spirit a constant reminder that life goes on, no matter how broken it feels. One night, after tucking her into bed, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine. The stars above were faint but steady, tiny pinpricks of light in an otherwise dark sky. As I sat there, I realized something that had been buried beneath layers of anger and sadness. I had survived. It wasn't graceful, and it wasn't without scars, but I had made it through. Linda had sent letters, long, pleading apologies that arrived sporadically, each one more desperate than the last. I couldn't bring myself to read them. They sat unopened in a drawer, a testament to her attempt to make amends, but I wasn't ready. Maybe someday I'd look at them. Maybe I wouldn't. For now, it didn't matter. My focus was on Rose and on carving out a future where the pain of the past wasn't a constant shadow. Bruce's imprisonment had brought its own strange sense of closure. Knowing he was no longer out there, free to manipulate and deceive, brought a sense of justice I hadn't expected. His absence left a void, but it wasn't one I mourned. Instead, I filled it with purpose, rebuilding relationships that mattered, creating memories that couldn't be tainted. Linda's parents continued to visit, their presence a bittersweet reminder of everything that had happened. They adored Rose, doting on her in a way that seemed to carry their own regret. Their efforts to make things right were genuine. And though I wasn't ready to fully trust again, I appreciated their sincerity. One evening, as Rose and I painted the living room walls, a pale blue she had insisted on, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: hope. It wasn't the naive, boundless hope of my younger self, but a quieter, more resilient kind, the kind that comes from surviving the worst and realizing that there's still so much worth fighting for. As the paintbrushes swished and Rose's giggles filled the room, I made a silent promise to myself and to her. We would build a life that was honest and strong, one where trust wasn't a fragile thread, but a sturdy foundation. And though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, I knew we'd walk it together. Looking back, I realized that the life I had lost wasn't perfect, no matter how much I had tried to convince myself otherwise. The cracks were there all along, but I had ignored them, clinging to an ideal that was never real. Now, as I stood in the middle of this unfinished home, I saw the beauty in imperfection. Life was messy, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel, but it was also full of moments worth cherishing. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let out a genuine laugh as Rose smeared blue paint across her cheek and grinned up at me. This was my life now, imperfect, messy, and beautifully mine. And for the first time, I was okay with that.